azoospermia, as you know, is defined as complete absence or lack of sperms in the ejaculate. And whenever we see a semen analysis report with nil sperms, the immediate first thought of, I think, 90% of us is that it is azoospermia. We should know that it is amenable to treatment in many cases. The specific therapy depends upon the underlying cause. Mostly it is physician guided, supervised HRT. So let us have first the welcome of the chairpersons. I invite Dr. Jyoti Agarwal. Dr. Jyoti Agarwal has been an ex-Hardonian throughout. She's a gold medalist, MBBS and MD Gynae, senior consultant and director, Life Care Center and Life Care IVF. She is presently our president of DGF East. She's also the treasurer of Delhi Gynae Forum, certified trainer for IVF and ultrasound. She's been the recipient of the Teachers Excellence Award, DGF 2017, and also Appreciation Award, DGF East 2015. She's participated in various national CME and workshop as faculty. I welcome Dr. Jyoti Agarwal.
Dr. Deepti.
I invite Dr. Kuldeep Jain sir. Dr. Saab is laparoscopist, infertility and IV specialist, director, KGIVF and Laparoscopic Center at Delhi. He's the founder, secretary and past president of IFS, chairperson Endometriosis Committee FOXI 2017-2019, scientific committee member 2019-22, chairperson International Exchange Committee IFS. He's also been the organizing secretary of IFS 2016. Formerly, he was a reader at GTP Hospital and editor-in-chief of Fertility Science and Research at the official journal of IFS. Dr. Saab has written more than 35 research papers in various national and international journals, and also been a recipient of Excellence Award from IMA Rajdhani Gaurav Samman. Welcome, Dr. Kuldeep Jain. I invite Dr. Poonam Goyal. Ma'am was the most dynamic president of IMA EDB. She's a senior consultant of IVF and Infertility Max Hospital, Vaishali, director and HOD OBS and Gynae Panchshir Hospitals, Delhi. She's also FOXI trained for advanced ART, trainer for advanced ART course, recipient of the Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Excellence Award for Academic 2019, Wonder Foxine Award 2019, IMA National President's Appreciation Award 2019. She is the author and editor of books Endometriosis, Confusion to Consensus, and How I Manage Fibroid and Fibroids. Her special interest is in infertility, ART, and ultrasound. Welcome, Dr. Poonam Goyal. And Dr. Aruna Saxena. आप म्यूट कर दीजिएगा विक्रांत सबको. Dr. Aruna Saxena is MD Gynae, trained at the prestigious King George Medical College, Lucknow, with 25 years of post-MD experience. Currently director of Orchid IVF, Indirapuram. Consultant and unit head at Apollo Cradle Hospital, Indirapuram. Special interest in clinical embryology, trained at National University of Singapore. She has earlier worked as director of Pushpanjali IVF and Infertility Institutes and Life Care IVF, and trained more than 100 gynecologists in IVF. She is a proud recipient of the DGF Teaching Excellence Award in 2017. Welcome, Dr. Aruna Saxena.
Thank you, Dr. Deepti.
Dr. Sushma Jindal is a gynae laparoscopic surgeon and infertility specialist. She has a fellowship in advanced gynae laparoscopic surgery from Germany and fellowship reproductive medicine for clinicians, Singapore. She's the director of the Dr. Sushma Jindal Hospital AJY SYT Fertility Clinic. Welcome, Dr. Sushma Jindal. I request Dr. Jyoti Agarwal, our president and also the chairperson for today's webinar, to please welcome the speaker. Dr. Jyoti.
Thank you, Dr. Deepti. Can you hear me now? Am I audible now, Dr. Deepti?
Yes, you are.
First of all, a very warm good afternoon to all of you. It's my proud pleasure and honor to invite and welcome Brigadier R.K. Sharma for today's session. He's the director and head of the Department Institute of Reproductive Medicine and IVF Center, Primus Super Specialty. He has been the founder director of Fertility Center at Army Hospital in Delhi and Command Hospital, Pune. He is the recipient of many awards, Foxy, Ashisht Seva Medal by President of India, Gynecologist of the Year Award by Delhi Gynae Forum 2013. But above all, I know him personally because he is my guru. Dr. Aruna would remember very vividly our training with him at Pune. I can never forget. He's very approachable, humble, polite. Anytime I have any query, even today, maybe even the silliest question, he will answer my query. I welcome Dr. Sharma. Good afternoon, sir. Dr. Sharma, please. Can we have the slides for Dr. Sharma, please? Spermia, that is hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism.
Vikrant, full screen kar do bhai.
Pre-testicular, testicular, or post-testicular. Today we'll be discussing the pre-testicular azoospermia, and let's see what we are going to learn and hear from Dr. Sharma. Welcome, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you for inviting me to speak on pre-testicular azoospermia. Now the story builds up like that. A patient comes to us as a case of couple coming to you for infertility investigation, and no semen test has been done earlier. You order the semen examination and you find that the patient is having azoospermia, or the person comes with a report of azoospermia either with a wife or alone, and he wants to know what is the best treatment for him. Now we must remember that one single report is not sufficient to call him an azoospermia. We should at least do 2 semen examinations, at least 2 to 3 months apart. And if you find that in all the samples he is having azoospermia, and then also being an IVF clinic, we should centrifuge the semen sample. Even the semen is showing azoospermia, you may find few sperms in the pellet, and that gives a hope to the patient that yes, he can, without much of treatment, still father the child with the help of ICSI. But if you find that even after doing centrifugation, you do not find any sperms, so we know yes, he is a true case of azoospermia. Now the azoospermia can be due to basically 2 reasons. One is that the sperms are not being formed at all. Or secondly, the sperms are being formed, but there is an obstruction. They are not coming through the regular passage outside. So there is an obstructive azoospermia. Now, we have to talk about the patients who are not able to form the sperms. Now, this again can be of 2 categories. One is where the germ cells are not there at all or damaged, or the second is the germ cells are there, but they are not being stimulated by FSH and LH, with the result, they have a azoospermia, what we call it a pre-testicular azoospermia. Now, these patients, in the testis, basically there are 2 compartments. One is the Leydig cells, which produce the testosterone, and the second is the area where the sperms are being produced, seminiferous tubules. Now, both are dependent as well as independent. Now, the Leydig cells have to produce testosterone locally to create an androgenic environment, and FSH under that situation acts on the germ cells in the seminiferous tubules, and they mature to form a mature sperm. Now, the patient who is azoospermic, we may find that he may be having a amenable reason, or he may be having a non-amenable reasons. So basically, if you divide that into 3 parts, one is there is a primary testicular failure where there are damage to the germ cells. Now, these patients, whatever treatment you may give, they will not form the mature sperms in them. Now, this can be examples like mumps or the patient who got a cryptorchidism and it has not been treated early. So these are some testicular injuries which have happened. So I will not talk about that. Another group is where there is an androgen insensitivity. Now, the first one being the primary hypogonadism, you may find that the FSH levels are high in that. So once you find the FSH levels are high, they may have a normal testosterone levels or low testosterone levels. But these are the patients where no treatment, the medical treatment is going to help them. The second one is the androgen insensitivity. Here you do the blood test, FSH, LH and testosterone, you find all the levels are normal. But the receptor level, there is an androgen insensitivity. So with the result, these the gonadal germ cells also, they are not able to mature because the receptors for the testosterone are not there. Now, the best part of all these azoospermia patients is the hypogonadism, which we call it a pretesticular azoospermia, where if you do the blood test, FSH or LH. Now, this is one question which is generally asked, which test should be done or both should be done. Now, basically, the FSH is the hormone which is produced by the anterior pituitary and it does not have too much of diurnal variations. So, the first test should be done is the FSH level, and you find the FSH levels are very low, and you've done the LH also, the LH levels are also very low. And in these patients, the testosterone levels also, because testosterone depends upon the function of the Leydig cells and the Leydig cells are dependent on the LH. So you'll find that the testosterone levels are also very low. So this is the group which is having azoospermia, and though there will not be very many of the patients of this category, but they can be treated medically and then subsequently, depending upon how many sperms we are able to get in the ejaculate by IUI or IVF. Now this hypogonadism, it can also be isolated, FSH or LH deficiency, or it can be associated with other anterior pituitary hormones. So when we are talking about isolated hypogonadism, it is a rare cause of subfertility. In 1% of male, whatever you do, you have 100 infertile males. So 1% of them will have hypogonadism. But why are we so concerned and we are giving so much of cognizance to this? Because this is the one group which is easily treatable medically. So that is why the importance of this group, that it is treatable. Now the second thing is it could be congenital or it could be acquired hypogonadism. The acquired one could be due to some defect in the pituitary gland, the disease of the pituitary gland because of the previous surgery, or due to infarction of the pituitary gland or tumor, infections, or some metabolic conditions, where the possibility of damage to the pituitary gland is there. And because the pituitary gland is damaged, the FSH-LH is also reduced or absent. So with the result, the patient goes into hypogonadism. And the second one is the congenital hypogonadism, which is the Kallmann syndrome. The Kallmann syndrome is not that common, but it can happen 1 in 10,000 to 60,000 births. So if you have 60,000 male babies, out of that, one may have a Kallmann syndrome. And later on, when they grow up, they come as a azoospermia to us. And so these are the congenital and acquired causes for hypogonadism. Now there are other, little uncommon causes in the congenital as well as in the acquired causes. So I'll just go through the list. The anosmic Kallmann syndrome, in my practice, I've hardly seen any patient having hypogonadism and also complaining of anosmia. Most of them, they have a normal, the feeling of smell. So they are anosmic Kallmann syndrome, which is more common in our population, what I've seen. Then congenital adrenal hyperplasia, fertile eunuch syndrome, and also mutations in the FSH and LH in the beta chain of these two hormones can also be the cause of hypogonadism. Mutation in the leptin and the leptin receptor genes, these are all very uncommon conditions, more for research purposes rather than practical purposes. And then, the other mutations like Prophet protein 1 mutation and HRS1 mutation, these are also associated with other hormones along with the gonadotrophin deficiency. Then there are other syndromes which are associated with hypogonadism, but most of them, they don't come to us for the treatment because they are diagnosed very early in childhood, and they hardly would require infertility treatment because they are not healthy to bear a child. They don't get married also, like Prader-Willi syndrome, congenital spherocytosis, Moebius syndrome, cerebral ataxia, retinitis pigmentosa, etc., etc. Or they would directly go for a donor insemination. Now the other the causes of acquired is that the head traumas, autoimmune diseases, some parasitic diseases, Crohn's diseases, beta thalassemia, hemoglobinopathies, hemochromatosis, where the iron gets deposited on the pituitary gland, and disorders of the lipid metabolism can also be the cause of acquired hypogonadism. But most of the time you will find idiopathic. You will not find any cause of hypogonadism if you need to try to investigate them deeply. Most of them are idiopathic. You will not be able to diagnose the cause of their hypogonadism. Now, a few words about the Kallmann syndrome. Basically, you remember your embryology. There are neuroendocrine GnRH cells which are there, present in the olfactory epithelium, and in the embryonic stage, they migrate towards the hypothalamus and also towards the anterior pituitary. Now, the migration does not take place. So, with the result, either the patient would have a GnRH deficiency, which is very difficult to diagnose because we do not do any blood tests for the GnRH levels. But yes, either because of GnRH deficiency or because of the FSH and LH deficiency, the gonadotrophins deficiency which can be easily detected by doing the FSH LH levels. We may find that these are the patients who will subsequently come with azoospermia. And also the olfactory bulb hypoplasia and abscess may be associated. With the result, they may have a concurrent anosmia. But as I said earlier, we have seen many hypogonadism males, but with anosmia are very, very rare. I have not seen in my practice, a person complaining also of anosmia and having hypogonadism. Then this syndrome can also be, having a lot of genetic variations. Either it could be X-linked chromosome inheritance via mutation in KAL1 gene, or it could be because of fibroblast growth factor receptor 1 gene or receptor 8 gene deficiency. Now, these are all academic, because once we know the FSH levels are low and testosterone levels are low, we know that we are dealing with the hypogonadism, and we straightway go for the treatment. Now, how would you diagnose a case of a patient of a Kallmann syndrome? The patient would be a tall person. He may have a gynecomastia, and he may have a history of a cleft surgery when he was a child, or having cryptorchidism, micropenis, flat foot, and also may have anosmia. And you do the semen test, you may find they have azoospermia. Some of them may have a mental retardation, locomotor defects, deafness, and synchronesia also. But these are all the rare combinations which we see in these patients. So this is the morphological picture of a person. The only thing is they may have a osteoporosis, so we need to not only treat them for infertility, we have to guide them that subsequently they would require androgens to maintain their the calcium levels and prevent osteoporosis. Otherwise, they may go into osteoporosis. So it is not only a duty to make them father, it is also a duty to tell them about the future health issues also to these patients. Now, this Prader-Willi syndrome is another one which will not come to a gynecologist or IVF specialist because they are diagnosed very early in childhood. They have infantile hypertonia, obesity, kleptorchidism, short stature, etc. So these patients also do not come to us for the treatment. Now, a patient who is suspected to have a hypogonadism, I initially only mentioned the best thing to do for them is to do the FSH level, LH level, and the testosterone level. You find all of them will be,
Hello.
yes. So the values of these hormones will be low in them, and also if you look at the testes will be smaller than the normal size, because the testicular volume is basically when the seminiferous tubules, they are functioning properly. If the seminiferous tubules are not working for whatever reason, you find that the testicular volume is reduced. So when the patient is there, so you want to exclude any pituitary cause, the tumors, etc. So you may do, besides FSH LH, where suspected, not in all the cases, the MRI, which would be a better modality to see the sella turcica, to see if there is any anti-sella syndrome or some tumor over there. But most of the time, you will not find any abnormality in the sella turcica. Now, our aim would be, like if the patient has come before the fertility, to some other physician, he would have given them androgens, just to maintain his masculinity and to let him grow naturally. And by the time the patient comes to us, they may give a history that they have taken testosterone earlier. So if you do now their FSH, LH and testosterone level, you find their testosterone level will be normal, but FSH, LH levels will be low. So it is important to take a history from these patients, whether they have taken testosterone levels normal, otherwise you may miss the diagnosis. You may say that the testosterone level is all right. So that means there is no local cause, they directly send the patient for a donor examination. So if the patient was taking testosterone earlier, you would say, okay, you stop the testosterone level now, external testosterone, now you want a fertility. Now we'll be treating you, firstly, by giving you natural testosterone that will come to you the treatment. And once a natural testosterone there, the local androgenic environment will be created in the testes, and then we'll give the FSH subsequently, so that acts on the germ cells, so that the spermatogenesis can take place normally. So the patient, the goal of this treatment, the first one is already met by some physician by giving them androgens. And our duty as an infertility specialist is to induce the spermatogenesis and fertility to these patients. So the various forms of testosterone he would have taken. So take a history of that and see that before you plan the treatment for the infertility, you stop all these artificial testosterones in these patients. And if you read the last paragraph, do not give testosterone replacement for treatment of male infertility in this group of patients. So you will not be giving testosterone externally to these patients to create a testosterone environment in the testis. You would like to give the HCG, which is a surrogate LH, to these patients to create a local testosterone in the testis, which will act on the Leydig cells. Somehow the external testosterone, when given, like the thought may come to us, the patient is already having a normal androgen level. Why don't we start the FSH level straightway? And androgen is already there in the blood. And why we should, wait for the, the artificial testosterone to wane away and then, give a natural testosterone by giving a LH. Now the thing is, if you give testosterone from outside, it has been found that inside the seminiferous tubule or inside the testes, the testosterone environment is not created. It is externally the testosterone is working, but not in the testes. So giving FSH directly to these patients will not help these patients. So the treatment for them is basically, the first line is to give HCG injection. HCG contains both, it contains LH, surrogate LH activity. So with the result, the beta chain is, similar to the LH. You given the dose of 1500 to 2000 IU subcutaneously or intramuscularly, depending whether you are using the highly purified HCG or normal HCG, 2 to 3 times a week for 4 to 6 months. And after that, you see the testosterone levels again. Now, if you find the testosterone levels have come to the normal level, that means there's a range in the mid-level if it is reached, and that is the time you start giving the FSH injection. Now, since FSH injection is costly, so what you tend to give is you give them the HMG injection, which contains both LH and FSH. Because this treatment is for a long duration, the patient may not be able to afford the FSH or the recombinant FSH. In Indian scenario, we may give the normal HMG to these patients in the dose of 75 IU 2 to 3 times a week. If the patient can afford recombinant, but most of the patients will prefer the low-cost treatment only, so we give HMG to these patients. And we keep on giving that along with the HCG injection till we get some sperms, say at least 5 million per ml per ejaculate. Now, this may take 1 to 2 years. So one shouldn't tell the patient beforehand only that it may take longer time. Most of the patients, they may lose patience. They may say, okay, you do the semen test. If you find few sperms, you do the IVF and ICSI for me. I cannot keep on taking the injection for such a long time. So that possibility is there. But one must remember that vast majority of these patients can conceive with the gonadotropin therapy. Although 71% of the patients with subsequent fertility have sperm concentration, which is considerably lower than the normal. So that means this group of patients can conceive spontaneously with a lower level also, which is suggesting that these patients, are the sperms which are produced, they are more fertile sperms rather than the normal population. So even with a lower count, with the natural intercourse also, they can conceive spontaneously. The 10% of the patients may maintain now once the patient has attained the pregnancy by natural method or by IUI or IVF and ICSI, depending upon how much of the sperm count, and should we continue, giving them the testosterone later on to maintain. So they have found that the 10% of these patients may maintain their serum testosterone levels after you have stopped the both HCG and HMG injection and once they attain the fertility. So that means that hypothermic, some patients may have a reversible, hypogonadism. So all the patients may not require the HRT after this treatment of fertility. So you should do the testosterone levels, and if you find that there is maintaining the testosterone levels, then one may not give testosterone levels as an HRT subsequent to the fertility. The patients who have developed hypogonadism before puberty and have not treated with gonadotropin or GnRH may need 1 or 2 years of therapy to achieve a semen sperm production. What I mean to say by that is the patients who are on testosterone, for the height, for the bone, and in a puberty only before their marriage. Now, these patients may not require that much time. They may get spermatogenesis earlier, but the patient who has never taken in testosterone and you are now treating at the age of 24 or 25 for fertility with hypogonadism, they may take a little longer time for their spermatogenesis to start. So neither you should lose the patients, nor the patient should be, or the patient should be given the counseling that he should have patience and it will take time, but he can definitely father his own biological child, either by IVF, ICSI or IUI or even the natural intercourse. So these are various references from where I took it. So the only point I again want to reiterate is that out of two hormones, FSH and LH, do the FSH levels. Because FSH levels, they do not change much. They don't have that much of diurnal variations as the LH. So you will be able to diagnose hypogonadism much better if you do the FSH levels. And secondly, FSH low, LH low, testosterone low, small testes with less hair on the body, you know that you are treating with hypogonadism. If he has got some symptoms like headaches and all, then you may do MRI to see the cell atrophy. Otherwise, it may not be required. You start these patients with the HCG injection, and see the testosterone levels are coming to the mid-normal level, and then you add FSH either alone, or the best is to reduce the cost, because for long duration, you add HMG to these patients 2 or 3 times in a week, 75 international unit, and then after 3 months, you do the semen analysis, you may find few sperms. The patient also get encouraged to continue the treatment, and if the patient can wait for some more time, you wait till at least you have achieved 5 million per ml. Otherwise, the IVF ICSI with his own sperms can be given if he loses patience in between. Thank you very much. And we also have to educate these males about continued HRT in 90% of patients. 10% may not require. The 90% may require HRT to maintain their bone mass later on.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting about pretesticular azoospermia. So for the benefit of the audience, what sir has told us and what we have learned is the only hormone which is to be done, or the first hormone to be done, is FSH, and we should counsel them that out of all kinds of azoospermia, this has got the best prognosis, but the treatment may take a long time. So they should be patient, both the doctor and the patient. We also had one patient from Chandigarh, sir. He was diagnosed to have hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism, but he went back to PGI Chandigarh, treatment from an endocrinologist, and after 6 months of treatment, sperms could be seen and they had a baby of their own. So I just wanted to know.
I just want to add one more thing. Nowadays, there is a iatrogenic hypogonadism. All the gyms and all, where
Yes.
the boys are going,
Yes.
they are given testosterone to them. And with the result, you find because of the external testosterone, their FSH levels, LH levels are very low. Testosterone levels are higher. And if you do the semen analysis, you find they are azoospermic. So in these patients, once you stop the testosterone and you wait for some time, you may find that the normal spermatogenesis may start in these patients. So there is iatrogenic hypogonadism, which is coming up nowadays because of this six-pack culture and the androgens which the young boys are taking.
What I wanted to know, sir, so you said after some time the testosterone level will improve, the FSH, LH, and they will maintain their normal levels, and they can have a baby on their own without any ART procedure. How much time should be given to them? 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and call them if you don't conceive, come back to us.
See, these patients, it depends if we can, most of the patients, they lose courage or patience in between. So they will not wait. But the person who cannot afford IVF, so we can tell them to wait for 2 years maximum. Yeah, by 2 years, if he doesn't improve much, then he may have to go for ART. But otherwise, the maximum limit is up to 2 years, that if our treatment is correct, the spermatogenesis would start and the wife may conceive spontaneously. But if the person is young and the wife AMH is normal, so maximum I think we can wait for 2 years. If the patient doesn't conceive in that much of time, then maybe the ART would be required for these patients.
Thank you, sir.
And there are some cases where there is isolated FSH or isolated LH deficiency.
Yes.
In those particular patients, what do you suggest? Should we give HMG or only HCG should be continued in those patients?
Now the patients who are having isolated FSH deficiency, so that means the LH is there. So that means their testosterone levels would be normal. So in those patients, you don't have to give HCG. So because naturally testosterone are being produced in the Leydig cells, and
Yes.
from the Leydig cells, they are going to the seminiferous tubules. Now these patients would require directly on FSH only. You need not give HCG priming to these patients.
Okay. In those patients, we don't need the priming then.
Yeah, then we don't require priming beforehand.
Sir, I have something to ask you. Sir, is there a role of letrozole or clomiphene in such cases?
No, because these patients, if you give, see, basically, they don't have, the gonadotropin secreting cells over there. So if you give the clomiphene and letrozole, so it will not act on them. So you require to give HMG and SCG only to these patients.
So then where is the role of letrozole and clomiphene, which is widely used these days for?
Now the letrozole is when there is the patient who is having unexplained oligozoospermia.
Okay.
Now in those patients, you may give letrozole or clomiphene, so that they can produce more FSH and LH, and with the result, the more spermatogenesis would take place.
Okay, sir.
So it is only in unexplained oligospermia where you may give clomiphene.
नहीं वो तो मेरे से बात ही नहीं हुई डॉक्टर सिंगला वो कह रहे थे अभी वो
Sir, what is your personal experience in these patients or those who are having congenital type of hypogonadism and hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism?
See,
Because in those patients we see that no, we don't get that good results as we get in acquired hypogonadism patients.
No, see what I find the problem is that the patients they don't have patience to wait for 2 years. So most of the time when the sperms are seen in the semen, they ask us to go ahead with the IVF.
ART, yes.
So that is the thing. And as far as the results are concerned, whether the spermatogenesis would take place early in cases of congenital hypogonadism or acquired hypogonadism, it really doesn't make a difference. It takes almost the same time in both the groups.
So what genetic test we advise to these patients, or we normally don't do any?
No, the thing is, even if you try to find out, these mutations and all, it is not going to make a treatment. It just increase the cost of treatment only.
Right, sir.
Because once you know that FSH, LH and testosterone levels are low in these patients, and you can go ahead with the treatment, because as such the treatment is long and costly. So adding this thing, academic reasons, yes, you may do the the mutation of the FSH and LH, this thing, but the beta.
Okay. Karyotype and Y deletion. Do we need to?
No, because they will not come with the azoospermia. Now the thing is, now the translocations when the patient have, you do the karyotyping, and some patients will, you do the karyotyping, you find that they have a severe oligozoospermia, and these patients over a period of time, they may go into azoospermia also. The patients who have translocations. So to start with, they have a oligospermia, and then later on, if you have not preserved the semen samples, they may go into azoospermia as well. Now, these patients, the best thing is to store the semen if they come early to you. You've done the karyotyping, and oligospermia is there. Or the microdeletion also, these patients would have a basically azoospermia, but then these patients. If you do the FSH LH levels, you may not find any abnormality in them. So in the microdeletions, it is a chromosomal defect, so it, affecting the Y chromosome. But the FSH LH levels of these patients may be normal.
So when we are talking about pre-testicular azoospermia, is there some genetic condition which can be transmitted to offspring? I'm asking from that point of view, should we do some testing so that we can avoid that?
Now the thing is, the Kallmann syndrome, it is X-linked also. So this is a possibility that, so for that, if you want to do it,
Yes.
the genetic studies, but then where it is available, I don't know. That is the biggest problem. If you don't get it in the routine, if you want to do the Kallmann syndrome, whether it is X-linked, possibility is there. So, or it is an autosomal recessive disorder. So, that actually these patients when they have anybody who's having Kallmann syndrome, so you have to tell them that there is a possibility of transmission to their sons.
Offspring, yeah.
Treatment. So the counseling part can be done, but then they will still go ahead if they want to have a biological child. Most of them say, okay, doesn't matter. You do with my sperms only. Nobody will say, oh, I'll go for a donor solution unless you cannot afford the treatment.
Okay, sir.
besides FSH and LH, is there any role of doing prolactin in these patients? Does
Now, the
prolactin
prolactin, hyperprolactinemia can also, present as a low FSH and low LH levels. And because of that, you may find that these patients would have a hypogonadism secondary to hyperprolactinemia. But to have that high level of prolactin, the patient will also have some pituitary adenoma, and the patient will come to you with headaches and all, primarily to the endocrinologist or to the physician first, and then it would be treated by the time the patient comes to you. A male having hyperprolactinemia will come to you basically not very high prolactin level, but with the loss in the libido. But they may have a normal spermatogenesis or a oligospermia, but not azoospermia. The azoospermia patient with hyperprolactinemia would possibly be going to the physician and endocrinologist subsequently, and then doing MRI, finding adenoma there, would be treated over there. To IVF specialists or to the gynecologist, they may come to you with a low libido, and you do prolactin level, and you find the prolactin level is higher, and you treat that prolactin level, the libido improves.
So what doses of capgolin we give to male patients if they have hyperprolactinemia?
Yeah, these patients depend upon the prolactin level. You may give the weekly, like we give it to the women, 0.25 milligrams.
Same doses. Okay.
And, or you give BD also, twice a week also to
Okay,
these
sir.
patients. And
Sudeep wants to make a point.
Madam?
Okay, it was really a wonderful overview. 2-3 points I would like to make as the current situation of hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism. I think one important thing is counseling in these patients. That is very, very important. Whenever you are starting, we are starting gonadotropin therapy. And that is because Dr. Sharma has already highlighted that these patients, they require a prolonged therapy, and that may be not affordable to these patients. So what they do, they start the injections, and then they every month they keep on getting their semen analysis done. And if there is no improvement in 3 months, they discontinue the treatment. So I think before starting the gonadotropin therapy, they should be very well counseled that what they should expect from the therapy. That is very, very important. Otherwise, you may miss these patients if you have not counseled them properly. That before 6 months, we don't expect a result as far as the appearance of spermatozoa in semen is concerned. And they should be prepared very well for a prolonged therapy. Now, over the period, we have changed our strategy in last 30 years. Initially, when IVF ICSI was not available, there was no other option to these patients. So we used to give a very long gonadotropin therapy for 1 year, 1.5 years, and then try to get a conception. But since we are having ICSI with us, so over the period, what is my strategy, and I think Dr. Sharma will also agree, that as soon as the sperm start appearing in the ejaculate, you should start preparing, because most of these patients, they will not go beyond 5 million, 7 million, 8 million, even with a prolonged therapy, and they lose hope, and the conception interval becomes very, very prolonged. So usually when these patients, they start getting the sperm in ejaculate, they should be guided towards some form of assistance, IUI or IVF, depending on the response. So that is again very, very important, because I am having almost 100 plus patients of hypogonadotrophic in last 30 years. And what I have seen in previous years, spontaneous conception was seen only in, I think, 10 to 12 patients. I am speaking before 2000. And after 2000, whatever patient we have included in our series, the conception rate, because once you start getting the sperms, then these patients, they can very well go for ICSI and they can get a better conception rate. So I think that should be the type of counseling which should go. Second thing, regarding the response, there are two groups in hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. One is where the FSH LH level is very, very low. Like it is less than 1. There is second group which is 2.5, between 2.5 to 1. So the response will be better. You can get a earlier response in those patients where you are having some amount of FSH LH and they respond little better. So you can categorize your patient, you can counsel these patients accordingly. So this is one thing. Otherwise, Dr. Sharma has already highlighted on doses and what else, because there are again 2-3 regimes. Some people give SCG for 6 months initially, but again that is very, very important. If the patient is not exposed on testosterone, then you have to give for a longer SCG and then you start HMG. I don't use any recombinant FSH, or because these patients they require some LH, so it is better to, and because it becomes more cost effective if you are using a urinary gonadotropin. There are a lot of studies which people have used recombinant FSH and LH combination in these patients, but for our patients I don't think we should give recombinant FSH or a combination of FSH LH. So HMG works very, very nicely in these patients, and most of these patients they respond with the continuous therapy, maybe 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year. So depending on the response, you can offer them IUI or IVF. IUI I have not done in these patients, in many patients. Only few patients I got the response for IUI. Otherwise, it is always less than 5 million. And if you see the criteria, usually we don't get the conception in these patients with IUI. So it is better to counsel these patients for a combination of HRT and some form of ART.
Okay, Kuldeep, so will it be advisable for these patients to do multiple semen freezing as the sperm starts coming because of poor compliance with the treatment?
Yes, I think that is a
very
good idea. And usually when you start getting the sperms, you should use, because as soon as you stop the HRT, again the azoospermia will be there. So for you have to have semen sample for the next pregnancy also. That is one option which we also give and discuss.
Dr. Kuldeep, what is the cutoff for FSH and LH, which you will call it low?
See,
males?
by definition, when we talk of hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, it is less than 2.5. But when we talk of hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, usually the level is less than 1. But there is a group where you will get 1 to 2.5. Again, they are categorized in hypogonadotropic hypogonadism only, because these patients, they are presenting to us, many patients, they are presenting to us as azoospermia. And these patients, they do respond nicely.
And same for LH as well, sir?
Yeah.
Less than 1?
Yes.
Dr. Shushma Jindal, please share your experience with us.
What about, sir, between 2.5 to 10, that gray zone? The FSH levels from 2.5 to 10, they will have oligo, or which category will they belong to?
They will have either idiopathic, because they come into the idiopathic OAT, so they may present either as the obstructive azoospermia, because
Okay.
they will be having the spermatogenesis. If the gonadotropin level are normal, then they will be having spermatogenesis. So these patients, they are basically obstructive azoospermia. So when you are having normal gonadotropin and patient is coming with azoospermia, usually you will find sperms in the epidermis and testes. The size of the testes will be
If this is somewhere around 5 or 6, we should think more of obstructive rather than pretesticular.
Or they may have a severe
Oligospermia. Not
So these
azos.
are the group of patients where the clomiphene may work.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
I want to ask one
Another thing
question.
I'd like to add, before starting any therapy in azoospermic patient, do the basic workup. Basic workup is examination of the patient, two semen analysis, which Dr. Sharma has already highlighted, and FSH, LH, and testosterone. So with this workup, you will be able to categorize your patient between the hypogonadotropic, hypergonadotropic, and obstructive azoospermia, and then you can start the treatment. These patients, they will not respond to your chloroquine and letrozole, which is already discussed. So please don't start any oral drug when you have categorized them whether hypo or hyper. Hyper will also not respond. Hypo will also not respond to your clomifene and letrozole. So only those patients who are normogonadotropic and having severe OAT or azoospermia, you can try a reliable course of 3 months to 6 months, not more than basically 3 months. I don't go beyond 3 months in these patients. And once azoospermia is there, I think the treatment is very well outlined.
How much? What should be the cutoff when we say that up treatment kaam nahi karega and you should go for a donor semen? What should be the upper cutoff limit and the pay? How much time should we wait before we call it a day?
In these patients, azoospermic
In the pretesticular azoospermia, or everybody is going to respond at all.
Sharma, what I do, if patient has received 6 months of therapy and patient has not responded, then I do offer a surgical sperm retrieval before basically suggesting them donor insemination. So
It is very unlikely that you will achieve anything from the sperm test because sperms are not being produced at all.
yeah,
So
but
the surgical procedures will also not give you much good result.
no, you may get the sperm retrieval from there because these sperms are very, very few and only few islets are producing.
Okay.
So the sperm may not be, they will take time.
The immature ones.
If you continue for 1 year, 2 years, maybe you will have some sperms in the ejaculate. So after 6 months, if you are not having sperms and size of the testes has increased, it is firm, then it is better to go for surgical sperm retrieval before starting, before giving the option for insemination.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
No, these are the patients, possibly there is a problem in the receptors. So this urinary products may not work. It's only in this subgroup of patients where the recombinant hormones would be better choice. But it's very difficult to differentiate between the two. So a patient who is adamant he wants to have his own biological child and is not ready for donor insemination, then from urinary products you switch over to the recombinants and you find that they start responding.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am,
Dr. Sushma Jindal? Dr. Sushma Jindal will share her experience with us.
I want to know from Dr. R.K. Sharma how to go about in congenital adrenal hyperplasia having 21 hydroxylase deficiency.
See, the thing is, these patients, they would go to the endocrinologist because it's a congenital adrenal hyperplasia. They do not come to us. They have already treated by the endocrinologist or by the surgeons over there if there is a hyperplasia. So most of these patients, when they come to us, in my, I have never seen a male coming to you with azoospermia and congenital adrenal hyperplasia to me. But yes, if they come to me, I would definitely consult an endocrinologist rather than treating, because I'm not expert in that adrenal part of it. And these patients, like if you see, they may not respond to your normal treatment as they would respond in a hypogonadism. So if you have treated any such patients, please let me know.
Okay.
Madam, the expert comments, please.
Dr. Kuldeep?
Ma'am, you are not audible.
Now, as far as, after teaching male infertility for a long time, I will make 3 comments. One thing is cases of cryptoazoospermia. I came to see a patient about 8 or 9 years back, This gentleman, I said, the specimen report says it's azoospermia. What's the problem? He says, it can't happen, madam. So he got it done from other lab, and again, it was azoospermia. Then he was looking a bodybuilder. I said, आपका profession क्या है? कहने लगा, gym चलाता हूँ मैं. तो फिर I said कि आप तो इसमें जो drugs लेते हैं, उसमें ही कुछ ऐसा है. And then he stopped the treatment in 6 months' time. He conceived on his own, and he brought his wife to us. So thereafter, I found, repeatedly, we got many cases where there was a cryptoazoospermia in such patients who have been taking the treatment from the gym. So this is a very common problem, and I think we should know about it. Dr. Sharma has very clearly highlighted the patient of severe oligozoospermia, where there's a microdeletion is there. They proceed like this, that they have severe oligozoospermia and they will go to azoospermia. So they must be initially advised about that they must freeze their semen, because आप जब शुरू में मेल को बताओगे ना आपको ट्रीटमेंट की जरूरत है तो वो अपना he doesn't believe what you're saying. So I think this counseling should be there in black and white, that you must freeze your sperms. And thirdly, coming to this pre-testicular azoospermia, I think at the initial time the counseling has to be great. This Chandigarh gentleman also, we had written in writing that the literature shows that the pregnancy rate is to the tune of 75-80%, and he should not leave it up. Tall Sardarji, he went to PGI, got endocrinology treatment there, and about 6-7 months time, he said there are sperms, and he went for adenic seed. He has got it. Now, what I wish to just tell you, each one of us, the ordinary gynecologist, what should they should know? You give an HCG to produce androgens. Unless the endogenous androgens are produced, you cannot. These endogenous androgens are going to act on with the FSH, and then they are going to produce the sperms. So I think the crux lies here. As Sir has said, the people have taken an androgen treatment. They will take about 6 months' time. I met the Israeli expert, and he said, "Madam, 5 to 6 months, we are sure that they will produce sperms." And people will take longer time in case if they have not been exposed to anything. That will be almost 1 year. And we are sure that 80% of these people will have babies. I think this counseling is very important. If the counseling is great, then I'm sure they will stick to it. Otherwise, they will leave the things. So the counseling should be there in a black and white, that you have got a great hope, and that's what all about is. So, sir, if anything, last minute you have to say anything?
Yeah, these patients, besides this therapy, would also require some antioxidants and the micronutrients.
Correct, agreed.
That also is a part of the treatment. So besides giving HCG and HNG, they would require some micronutrients and antioxidants as well to expedite the sperm production.
Many of these patients, they do require, basically they also complain sexual dysfunction because the testosterone is again low. So you have to take that part separately whenever you are treating the patient, because if you add testosterone during that time, a patient is consulting someone else for loss of libido, then your treatment part may be nullified. So you have to ask in beginning whether they are having some sexual dysfunction also. Because you are treating the patients for basically infertility, and they are having another problem of loss of libido and other things. So, and many of these patients, they do take a lot of Ayurvedic drugs. I think, and they will not tell you until unless you ask them. And that may be one reason to have suppressed spermatogenesis in spite of getting good amount of gonadotropin during the therapy. So, because these Ayurvedic drugs, they have a lot of heavy metals and other things in that. That is again a cause of testicular failure.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Sharma, why we want to know, many patients these days we are getting, the count is low, but practically all sperms are dead. Whatever you do on them, the sperms are dead. So what is to be done for such patients? It is nothing to do with this.
The thing is, how they have collected the semen sample, that is one thing. They should not use any lubricant. Because many times, if you ask them in private, they would say that they cannot masturbate, so they have used water or saliva as a lubricant. And when that gets contaminated, it changes the osmolarity of the semen sample. So that is another common cause of all dead sperms. Secondly, if he has taken help of his wife, some people are not able to give the sample by masturbation. So what they do is they have this coitus interrupters to give you the semen sample. And along with the semen sample, some amount of vaginal fluid also gets contaminated into your this thing. Now, if you make a slide and if you find the navicular cells in the semen sample, you know where the mistake has been done by this individual. Because the acidity of the vaginal fluid will also, kill most of the sperms. They become all motile. Having said that, then we should also see if there is any pyospermia or not. Now that is another cause for finding that there are sperms, but they're all dead. Now to see that whether you'll see the round cells. Now we do not have this peroxidase test and all, but the simple thing is that make a slide and see the round cells, and if you find that they are engulfing the sperms, you'll find a round cell, and you will find that there is it is holding the sperm by the neck. It's very beautiful. The way the tiger holds, the prey from the neck to kill. This WBCs also hold the sperm by the same fashion. They don't hold the head, they don't hold the tail, they hold the neck of the sperm. So you will see that. It's very wonderful to watch that, how they hunt for the sperms. So you will find those round cells with the sperm, shaking, and you can see that it is being engulfed at the thing. You know that there's a pyospermia. Now the problem is you do the culture comes negative again and again. So that means the culture also is another issue in these patients. So these patients should give a semen sample where the culture is being done, not at a place where the collection center.
Correct.
Secondly, the culture plating should be done earlier for them. Otherwise, what happens is bacteria die away, and then you find the culture also shows negative. So the first thing is that how he is collecting the semen sample, has he used any lubricant, was it coitus interrupters, or if there are pus cells or round cells are there, whether they are pus cells, and then culture. And even if you find empirically, you can give antibiotics to these patients if the culture tests are coming negative, because somebody has not done the culture properly. That does not mean there are no infection in them. So the main symptoms of these patients, besides oligospermia and asthenospermia, would also be that they have to get up in the night to pass urine again and again, and they have a premature ejaculation as well. You know that there is a some prostatic infection in these patients. Now these patients may also have little backache as a history. So when you know that infection is there, the history-wise, and the culture is coming negative, so you can give the antibiotics to them. Now the best antibiotic which I find for the prostate infection is the Septran, because they have done a study long back in the books of urology. You will find this study that the per gram of prostate, the concentration of of different antibiotics they did, they found that the prostate being a fibromuscular gland with a poor vascularity inside, so all the antibiotics do not reach into the depth of the prostate. And they found that the Septron is the one which is able to reach. So to treat the infection, the best antibiotics where you find that repeated other antibiotics are failing. So you give them, then you may find that the motility starts coming, the pus rates start decreasing. The Septron for at least 14 days. And but then the sulfur drug, you have to guide the patient that take a small dose, and there's allergy, then don't.
Allergic.
The patient.
I think, thank you, Dr. Deepti. You should wind up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. That was a wonderful session.
इसके पास
and
स्कैनर नहीं है, कॉपी इससे भेजी, फोन से साफ नहीं आ रही.
Chaliye, Dr. Deepti.
Okay, Ji. So thank you so much. These are also fun interruptions. So thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you, Dr. Sharma. And thank you, Dr. Kuldeep Jain. And thank you to the chairpersons. It was Dr. Sharma. जब भी आते हैं, तो उनके जो छोटे-छोटे tips होते हैं, they are so wonderful and beautiful. You know, small things like you look for cells to show whether he's had a coitus interruptus despite all the instructions. These small things, I think they really add up to our experience and to our clinical assessment. Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Kuldeep Jain. Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.